Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. It's a great weekend. No, wait, it really wasn't, because Stanford knocked off both of our teams, Shane. The women's team went down on... Yeah, they are. They went down on Thursday. The women's team did. They got beaten pretty badly by Stanford. And then the men's team, I don't know what happened on Saturday when a team shoots like 60% from three-point range. I mean, it just is what it is. I don't like the Cardinal right now, and I'm not going to like them in football in September either.
Credit where it's due, Eric, because I remember last week or the week before, you said the only game on Arizona's schedule on the men's side that concerned you the rest of the month was the game at Stanford, and you were right. You nailed it.
But I didn't pick the end result, though, Shane.
No. But you were right to be concerned. And I think it's the classic case of an average team that happened to play out of its mind. And if Arizona and Stanford met 10 more times in a neutral court, I think Arizona would win 9 of them, or at least. So I won't think more of it than that until I have to think otherwise. So when they face Utah and Colorado this week, hopefully they take care of business. The other thing that occurred to me before we get into our buy or sell, Eric, is Arizona fans, or the men's basketball fans anyway, travel very, very well. We hear them at every Pac-12 arena. You hear the U of A chants. You see all the photos. Our guest. I'll preview our guest this week, Bruce Pasco, please. The ace, as you called the ace reporter for the Arizona Daily Star for the men's basketball team, is joining us. He took a lot of photos showing all the U of A fans in Berkeley and at Palo Alto for those games. I feel like, and I'm not blaming the loss on this, I feel like sometimes all the fans that infiltrate those arenas can be a bit counterproductive, just because I think it riles up the other team and it riles up the home fans a little bit more because they want to protect their court. It makes that for that kind of big game feel. If you watch the end of the Stanford ASU game a couple of days earlier, it was a close game late. Like, I was only watching on TV, obviously, but it sounded like there was no energy in that arena. Like, no one cared. It was a close game. 2 days later, Arizona comes to town. Their fans infiltrated that arena, and it's a whole different atmosphere. Even though the attendance wasn't great, but it's different. So, I think for a lot of teams, especially average teams like Stanford, where, let's be honest, it's NIT or bust for them. It kind of feels like this is our NCAA tournament game. This is our championship game. Maybe this is something we can remember the season fondly for, and it gives them that little boost of energy. So, while I love the fans, they travel. I love hearing the U of A chants on the road. I feel like sometimes maybe that's a detriment to the team. That's just my opinion.
That's a very interesting take, and we'll hear what Bruce has to say about that later in the program. But first, Shane, it is time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Check them out, iceshaker.com, and use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, to get $5 off. Or you can check out their products at fanatics.com. All right, Shane, this is a very interesting list of questions for this weekend. For this week's show. Number one, Shane, after watching Saturday's defensive performance against the Cardinal, it's officially time to be concerned about the lapses as compared to Stanford just having one of those nights.
I'm going to sell it. I think we know who this team is at this point. And those lapses could happen to any team. They've happened to every team this year. Purdue lost to Northwestern on Sunday. I still think Purdue's a very good team. Every team in the country has lost multiple games. No, I'm not concerned. I think it was kind of a weird game. Stanford shot out of its mind. They played 10 more times. I don't think they'd shoot 60% from the field. Tibellis got in foul trouble early. He never really got in the rhythm, even though Arizona scored 79 points, and that should have been enough to win. But it was just kind of a perfect storm, and that happens sometimes. And if it happens in the tournament, your season's over. Fortunately, this wasn't the tournament, and they won't see Stanford in that tournament. So, like I said, until we see more, if they struggle again against Utah or Colorado, I'm not concerned. The only longer-term thing that concerns me is that the Pac-12 championship race. They're 2 games back in the loss column to UCLA. There's a good chance that Arizona and UCLA are going to be battling for that 2 seed in the West. And so, from that perspective, they're behind. Definitely behind now in that race. But in terms of the team itself and going forward, I'm not concerned. I wasn't concerned when they lost a couple of games a few weeks ago. I'm not concerned now.
All right, here's why I'm going to buy this one, Shane. Stanford shot 61% from the field, including almost 56% from three-point range. They scored 88 points. And they're an 11-14 team. Now, I understand that they're better than their record, and that's fine. But there is no excuse, especially for Arizona, who has played pretty darn good defense lately, to give up a 61% shooting night. I don't care if Stanford was having the night of their lives. Arizona wasn't doing something defensively. Now, I understand the Tubelis foul trouble things and playing with a short bench, etc. No excuse to allow a team to shoot 61% ever. So yes, I'm concerned.
It happened. I remember a few years ago when Arizona won the Pac-12 tournament. They beat Oregon in the championship. That was Larry Markkanen's year. A long time ago now, really. Earlier in the year, Oregon blew out Arizona and Eugene, and they couldn't miss a shot. It wasn't anything Arizona was doing wrong. They just couldn't miss. And I remember, because I was at the Pac-12 tournament, I was covering it for ABC 15, and after the UCLA win, the game when Sean called a late timeout against UCLA, and they played Oregon next, I asked him, what needs to be different? What do they need to do to beat Oregon? And he said, they got to miss a few shots to start. So sometimes it happens, and sometimes teams play out of their minds. And like I said, if Utah and/or Colorado shoot 60%, then we can have that conversation. For now, it was a one-game thing, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we will agree to disagree on that one and move along. All right, Shane, number 2, a number 1 seed is no longer realistic for the men's team by yourself.
I am going to leave a small crack open, so I will sell it just with that small crack, because I think if they run the table, and that includes winning the Pac-12 tournament, and UCLA loses at least one more game on top of that, then I think Arizona could still get a 1. I don't think there's a chance that the selection committee will put a second-place Pac-12 team in as a 1 seed, because the Pac-12 stinks. The Pac-12 stinks, and the only way you're getting the 1 seed is if you win that conference, or at least win a share of it. So Arizona has to run the table. They have to beat UCLA, and UCLA has to lose another game along the way, which is possible. And then they have to win the Pac-12 tournament. But yeah, other than that, it's like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's really on the men's side as opposed to the women's side. It's those landmines you have to avoid, because there's so many opportunities for bad losses. And Stanford was a non-quad 1 loss. Arizona has 2 of those now. So they have a lot of quad 1 wins, and they'll have an opportunity for at least a couple more, but not that many more. UCLA and USC are probably going to be it, and then maybe 1 or 2 in the Pac-12 tournament, which will be a neutral side, even though it'll kind of like be home games for U of A. But yeah, very, very small margin for error. I think if they lose another game, that's it. And even on top, even if they don't, if UCLA wins the conference outright, I think that 1 seat's out the window.
I'm gonna buy this, Shane. You're actually probably right that if Arizona won out, so they have 5 games left in the regular season and then 3 in the Pac-12 tournament, they would be 30-4. It's pretty hard to not give a 30-4 team a number 1 seed,
and that would include 3 wins over UCLA.
Correct, likely. That to me doesn't seem realistic. So I'm going to buy this one. I don't see that happening. With that said, I think a 2 is very important, and there's a lot to play for, and we'll talk more about that. Now, I'm going to ask Bruce Pasco this question as well, Shane, but a bonus question, I guess I should say. This Arizona team has a very boom or bust feel come tournament time. And what I mean by that is this team is going to lose in the first or second round, or they're going to make it to the Final Four. I kind of not really an in-between type of team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I'll buy that, in that I think that, like, let's say Arizona goes in as a 2 seed. I think they're perfectly capable of being overconfident and having a bad matchup and losing to a 15 seed. I also think they're capable of getting to the Final Four. I agree with you in that regard. I think back to the 97 team. They're still the only team ever to beat 3 number 1 seeds in the tournament. The 3 other teams they beat were double-digit seeds, and every single game they won was by single digits. So they were that close. I mean, they almost lost to 10-seed Providence in the Elite 8. So there's a fine line between national championship and bowing out before you get to the Final Four. So, yeah, in that regard, I think that there's less of a margin for error for this team. I think last year's team was more talented, and they caught a terrible matchup in a bad location. But with that said, they still almost lost in the second round to TCU. So a lot of it just comes down to matchups. But yeah, I could see a scenario where this team gets burned out with their short bench. They get a little overconfident. They get a bad matchup. And the other thing is, they don't play a lot of tough competition in the Pac-12. Almost all the tough teams were in non-conference play, and so that's just not a great way to get ready for the tournament either. So, in those ways, I'll go ahead and buy that one.
I asked it. I have a pretty good assessment that I think this team is either going to really disappoint us come tournament time or really, really get us excited. I don't see this team as just losing in the Sweet 16. I think they go further than that or they lose before that. How about that?
That's fair.
I don't think they'll match last year. I think they'll either beat it or
it just always comes down to matchups, though.
Yeah,
and they get a bad matchup in the certain round, then it doesn't really matter.
It's going to be so disappointing. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next bonus question. The Pac-12 is in serious danger, Shane, only receiving 2 bids to the big dance. Now, Joe Lunardi in his current bracketology has Arizona and UCLA as high seeds, has USC, Oregon, and ASU as among the first 8 teams out. Do you think the Pac-12 is in serious danger of only getting 2 in?
I'll buy that they're they'll buy they're in serious danger because they said now they probably only have 2. I think they'll probably get 3, maybe 4, because just the odds are that a couple of the teams on the bubble, or at least one will get in. One will get hot late in the season, whether it's Utah or Oregon or USC or even ASU is still in the mix. I think that's 2 is a possibility. I would guess 3. I think 4 is more likely than 2. Put it that way. I'm confident they'll get 3 in, but as of now, considering that they likely would only get 2 as of now, I think you'd have to consider that serious danger this late in the season.
I'm going to postpone my answer to this question. I'm going to take the easy way out.
Oh, come on. You asked the question. You got to answer it.
I'm going to wait until after this weekend. So Oregon is at the Washington schools. If they sweep, I think they're going to make it in. USC has a tricky schedule. They have to play Arizona in a few weeks and ASU, and they have to go to the mountain schools in a couple weeks. So they're I think in trouble. I think ASU, I don't even know how they're being considered at this point. They would need to darn near win out in the regular season. And I'm sorry, I just don't see them winning in McHale Center. But it's not impossible because Arizona does lose to subpar teams.
They struggled against ASU at McHale last year. I'm not saying it's going to happen again this year, but that was an uncomfortable game. Not to the level of the football game, but it was still uncomfortable.
I'm not saying that the game in a few weeks won't be uncomfortable. I would be very surprised if Arizona lost that game.
Okay.
I'm just going to say that. Okay. Let's talk about the women's team, Shane. Number 3. The women's team must sweep Utah and Colorado this week for a shot at a top 4 seed. I mean, it's a must.
I'll buy it. Yeah. As of now, Charlie Cream at ESPN has them as a 6 seed. Yeah. I think that's about right. Yeah. They had a great opportunity against Stanford. They didn't come close. Like we said, Eric, it's weird because home court advantage doesn't seem to mean much to this team. They don't they don't necessarily play better in McHale. It's weird. Hopefully they do when they play Utah and Colorado. And they're going to need to win. I mean, they're going to need to win at least one of those games. But
they have to win both. You got to win both.
To get a top 4, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there are great opportunities ahead of them. It won't be their last chance for a great win. They still have to play Oregon again. And they got the Pac-12 tournament. They'll likely get at least a couple of chances for good wins there. But those opportunities are quickly running out. And so I think they'd have to they have to sweep at home in order to have a chance. Yep.
Yeah, really disappointing. I thought they would play better against Stanford. This team just does not have the look of a team that's going to be hosting regionals at McHale Center. Unfortunately, doesn't mean they can't, make a dent in the tournament. I just think that opportunity, unless they were to probably win out, I think at this point they have to win out and get to the championship game of the Pac-12 tournament to get a top 4 seed. I think other than that, I think we're looking at seeing them go on the road somewhere else.
I think that's fair. Yep.
All right, number 4. It's my favorite topic, Shane. Favorite topic on the show. It is officially time to declare the Pac-12 TV negotiations a disaster.
I have to buy that as well. Yeah, I think that Arizona needs to get out of the Pac-12. I'm with you on that. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay. All right, I love it. I am just really disappointed that there is not a deal done yet. And George Klyavkov, we were all excited he was going to be, George, what are you doing? Like, SMU and San Diego State are not moving the needle. I was going to play a game, Shane, and we'll probably do this in future weeks. Like in the Big 12 versus the Pac-12, name the opponents you would be most excited to see, like top 5 of each, and we'll compare them. Like number 1 in the Pac-10 would be Oregon, right? If they were to come in football, to come to Arizona. In the Big 12, I don't think they could offer anybody that's that exciting, But then when you look at the depth of it, like who's the second team in the Pac-10 that you'd really want to see? let's throw ASU out. So just toss ASU. They're not one of them. We'll talk about it in future weeks, but I don't know.
The basketball side though is really interesting. I know that doesn't move the needle like football does, but the Big 12 is the best basketball conference right now, at least on the men's side. They have
it's not even close.
It's not close, and they have defending the last two champions came from the Big 12. Yeah. So you'd have a lot more excitement on that side. But yeah, for football, I think it's time. It's time to move on. I think that George Kliavkoff I don't think he's necessarily to blame for the situation. I think he's trying his best to put a positive spin on things. But I think he was surprised when he stepped in the first day and looked at the financials and said, how am I going to find a way to get out of this mess?
Why do you think Arizona is and the Four Corners schools are so afraid to make a move here, Shane?
I think for now they're just determined to stick together, and I think that they're kind of looking at each other to say who's going to make the first move. I think because the risk of stepping out is maybe greater right now than the risk of staying together. But like if SMU is the best that the Pac-12 can do, I mean, if we're talking about like an all digital TV deal, which kind of sounds like that's the direction we're headed. That's not ideal. I think if Arizona can get out, I think they should.
Yeah, I don't really understand why these schools are so hell bent on staying with a conference that looks to be dead. Shane, like you're losing your two biggest marquee franchises. Let's say, why do you want to stay? I don't understand. I can't fathom it. I really can't. So I just wish Arizona would move on, and then we could talk about what it looks like. I think Arizona being able to have a recruiting base in Texas is really important. And I'm sorry, but SMU doesn't cover that.
But when you look, Arizona had a great recruiting base in Texas under Mike Stoops. So what's not necessarily it's not necessarily tethered to the Big 12 though, is what I'm saying.
But if Mike Stoops was got NFL players.
He did.
No other Arizona coach has gotten NFL players like Mike Stoops did since Dick Tomey.
True.
I mean, Mike's, and I'm not just saying Rob Gronkowski, but Nick Foles, and he's from Texas. I know he went to Michigan State, but
we had Mike Stoops in the original version of the show. Jeff Dean and I had Mike Stoops on before the Eagles Patriots Super Bowl because Nick Foles, Rob Gronkowski, and Marquise Flowers were all his guys, and so we had him on to talk about those guys. So and then you think about Rob Golden and Trevin Wade, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of other guys. But yeah, you're right. He had a lot of guys who not only went to the NFL, but like Brooks Reed and Earl Mitchell, who played a lot of years there. It's been a long time.
I just would love to see it. I mean, the only last point that not the only point, but another point that I'll make, and then we'll move on here. When you look at the Big 12 in football, they have TCU who made it to the championship game this year. They now have Cincinnati who made it to the Final Four last year.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Pac-12 as is now, Oregon was in the championship game in 2014, and I believe Washington made it to the Final Four a few years later.
Yeah.
Is there
a couple years later? Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
that's it. So you've got two in the last 2 years in the Big 12, and you've got zero in the last. I mean, if memory serves me correctly.
But you're right though. Like as far as like football traditions, USC and UCLA are two of the biggest for Arizona, and they're gone. As long as we can keep that rivalry going with ASU, then I could probably, give or take the rest of the Pac-12.
R.I.P. Pac-12. Coming up next, let's talk to Bruce Pasco, the ace reporter, as I like to call him, from the Arizona Daily Star here in Wildcat Country. Scooby, we sent you an ice shaker. They are a sponsor, courtesy of our buddy Chris Gronkowski. You have it right there.
I love my ice shaker. Fun fact: when I trained with Glenn Gronkowski, everybody, when we would train together, people thought I was the other Gronk brother. So it's kind of funny. But yes, I love my ice shaker. It is very good. I use it every day. I am a veteran to the ice shaker game, by the way.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
Shane, we are very glad as always to be joined by the ace reporter, as I like to call him, from the Arizona Daily Star. He is an institution, as I told him before we had him on. It is true. Bruce Pasco joins us here in Wildcat Country. Bruce, always glad to have you, but I'm going to start you with a tough question. This Arizona team, more than I'd say others in the last decade, for example, seems like a boom or a bust team in the tournament with nothing in between. Would you agree with that statement or disagree?
Well, that's a tough one, Eric, because I think it's I might have thought that last year's team was kind of more like that in the sense that they had to be a certain way. I think this team's got a little more versatility in that they can play different styles. They've won games scoring 110 and they beat UCLA scoring 58, and they've got they've got two really good inside players, of course, and pretty good shooters that usually can make that sort of inside out one work, and one or the other is working even if the other's not. So they're a little more I think a little more I don't know what you call it, sustainable or whatever, or a way where they can survive. But on the other hand, they're not as talented as they were last year, and they're thinner. They're going with a 7-man rotation. That, if I was a coach, I'd be scared. And I know Tommy Lloyd said, I want that 8th guy to develop, but he just does not see anybody ready to step in. And I think that Stanford game proved that over and over. So, in that sense, if they get in the tournament and they have a deal like they did at Stanford, where, Tubelis gets some foul trouble and maybe some questionable calls, but they go the wrong way, same thing could happen. So in that sense, they could be boom or bust.
So, Bruce, what happened to Henry Vasar in that regard?
I've heard kind of they just don't think he's that tough, at least right now as a freshman. I think maybe he hit a little bit of a freshman wall, and they just don't have much confidence in him right now. I think everybody knows he has a long-term upside. He's very talented and skilled for that size and can run. Pretty good shooter from outside, but he just hasn't shown it enough on a consistent basis that in the thick of Pac-12 play that they're going to turn to him. And that doesn't seem to be changing. I think even a few weeks ago, Lloyd was holding out hope that might happen. And I think probably their best bet is, Adama Ball maybe being that 7.5 or 8th man. And they didn't even use him at Stanford. So it's just, it's interesting right now.
Bruce, what do you think happened at Maples Pavilion? Was it more Stanford just playing out of its mind, or a momentary lapse for Arizona that could possibly seep into their next 2 home games? Where do you think that all falls?
I think honestly, I think Stanford's better than they played, kind of like Washington State. Like, I don't, maybe it's me, but I thought both Washington State and Stanford were going to be much better than they played this year. But when they played Arizona, they were those teams. So and it's the old thing where you get if you're Arizona or UCLA, you get everybody's best shot. And they definitely did. Stanford played very well. They hit some very tough shots. They obviously were motivated, and defensively, they also played out of their minds. I mean, they have the bodies to do it where they switched off of screens. They have basically the whole team is like 6'8" or 6'7", and so they just had, they didn't, it wasn't a problem for them to switch off of screens and make it tougher for Arizona to pass the ball around and shake somebody off on that third pass where they get a guy open. It just never happened. And then you had the foul trouble on top of that to Tubelis. Arguably a couple of calls, may have been close or whatever, but they went against him. And then so you combine those two things and they just couldn't overcome it. And then, and I think secondarily, the fact that it was at Stanford, even though Arizona had good fans support there, it was at Stanford. And it was, another road game after a Thursday night where, frankly, I thought with the 7-man rotation Thursday night, I looked at that and I thought, wow, Tommy Lloyd should go really deep in his bench this game and keep those guys rested so they come back Saturday. Well, he couldn't, because actually we're struggling against Cal. They got up big early and then they struggled. Yeah. And so those guys go into Saturday and it's just like any other Saturday. They're not any more rested than they are. And, maybe that plays a little bit of a role too.
You mentioned all the U of A fans that travel to watch this team, and anyone who follows you on Twitter saw the photos of the U of A fans at Stanford and at Cal, and they go everywhere in the Pac-12. You can hear them if you watch on TV. You can hear the U of A chants. I feel like sometimes that could actually be counterproductive for Arizona, because I feel like maybe it lights a fire under the home team and the home fans and makes them realize this is a big game, and even if we're not having a great season, this could be a big win for us. Is there anything to that in your opinion?
Well, yeah, it kind of works both ways. I think, the guys say, I think Cedric Henderson said it, after Cal, he'd never experienced before. He was like, this is weird. We're not even at home, and these people are up standing U of A chant. He said how great it felt. But yeah, I think it may be, for certain teams that, it does make them realize it's a big game, and maybe, motivates in a sense. It's probably embarrassing to be a Cal player and have half of the people in your own building are not even rooting for you. And that's, but if you play better, I mean, I've seen Cal when that place is full and it's rocking, and the U of A fans, and there's always about 1,000 U of A fans will show up for a Cal game. But when you've got 10 in the building, it's not a big deal. When you've got 2 in the building, like you had Thursday, it is a big deal. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing, but Arizona's really, however you look at it, Arizona's really fortunate. There's a lot of alums in the Bay Area and LA that come out to those games, and I think it's more noticeable in the Bay Area because those teams traditionally, at least the last decade or so, haven't been very good for the most part, and so you really see the U of A fans.
Bruce, I know Shane's probably going to shoot me a dirty look for this question, but I can't help myself. I'd like to get ahead of myself, like big time. The Final Four next year, obviously in 24, is in Glendale. What do you expect Arizona's roster to look like next year compared to the way it is now? I know, Shane, I'm not buying tickets. I'm just asking the question.
No, it's always fun to look ahead. You know what, Eric, because the coaches never will. So like they'll, and so Tommy Lloyd doesn't even like to look ahead a week, much less next year. And so it's fun to kind of speculate about it. The problem is it's college basketball, right? So who knows who anybody's going to be like next year? I mean, the transfer portal, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that, they're going to lose the 2 grad transfers, and you got to figure, there's a lot of guys that aren't playing. So probably 1 or 2 of them will probably transfer. But, if they're not playing and they don't make the rotation by the end of this year, then probably not, maybe not going to be that big a loss. Unless it's somebody like Vasar who could become, an NBA prospect if he sticks around. You probably don't want to lose him. But I don't know. So, but I think, the core, I think it'd be really interesting to see what Tubelis does, because he's clearly played himself into a draft pick, whether or not he wants to be a potential, high second round guy like he maybe is now, or risk it and come back and see if he can get in the first round. I don't know. I mean, I think most guys nowadays will just leave because the money is so good there, even in the second round. And the opportunities and the developmental thing, but Tubelis is an unusually loyal and kind of guy who seems to really like it here. So it wouldn't shock me if he comes back either. And I think Umar Ballo, probably even more so, probably could help himself by coming back, and because his game is really good for college, obviously, but for the NBA, there's not a lot of guys like him. So he might, so he might be back. Kirk Kriisa, Pelle Larsson, those guys. You'd think they would probably want to come back and have another crack at it, unless they get, unless they get a really good offer to go back to Europe or something like that. But both of those guys have a chance to keep playing their way towards, a possible NBA career as well. So maybe they want to come back. It'd be interesting. So I guess what I'm saying a long way here is I think they'll have probably more of this team back than most teams would in this situation, just because of just thinking about the guys they have and what their mentality is and where they're at. So they should be pretty good, and then, I think you look at Tommy Lloyd's track record, and I know it's a short sample size, but he got it done last year. Last year in mid-April, there wasn't a whole lot on that roster, and you were wondering what was going to happen. Even Kirk Kriisa he was coming back. But you weren't sure really if he was going to have enough to round out the roster, and those, and he pulled in the 2 grad transfers, and Vasar came in late and really kind of filled it out. So, and then they got Boswell, just, they got him to reclassify. That was kind of fluky because he got hurt, and it made sense for him to reclassify and come in and give it a shot. But anyway, basically he got it done. So I think, part of it is you probably figure, based on Lloyd's track record, that he'll figure something out, and they're going to be decent. They, whether or not they'll be better or not, it's hard to say, but they're going to be top 25 caliber.
Well, there's no doubt. And if Tubelis comes back, I'm going to tell you this: they're top 3 next year. Any way you swing it.
Yeah.
And I believe he has like a Tyler Hansbrough type. Like, I feel like Hansbrough, remember he was that guy that just kind of stuck around, then in his senior year ended up becoming player of the year, I believe won the Wooden Award, then won a national championship. I feel like that could be Tubelis next year. But the question is, when it comes to grad transfers, Tommy Lloyd this year did not, Ramey was good, but was not one of the elites that was out there, like a Shireman who went to Creighton. Do you expect to see Tommy Lloyd get one of those big name grad transfers, whoever it is? Or do you think he's always going to kind of look further down the board, let's say?
Well, I think that gets complicated by NIL money, frankly. I think that there's some NIL activity here. But I think Lloyd that's secondary for him, and he's pitching guys on like, hey, if you come here, you're going to develop into an NBA player, or you're going to get better, or whatever. That's his pitch. Some of these schools, I know there was one grad transfer they're going after last year. I believe, rumors were he was, given over 200,000 or promised or allegedly. And like, if that's true, I don't know if that's true, but if that's true, sometimes you just can't compete with that. And, and nobody's going to say it on the record. You don't really know. But that guy's just not going to come to Arizona, maybe if that's what he wants or whatever. So there's just a lot of factors like that, but behind the scenes, so you don't know. But I think more than anything, though, I think Lloyd has made it clear that he's looking for fit and personality. And the problem with the grad transfers particularly is a lot of them come in with agendas, and they're not NBA players yet. They want to be NBA players. They want a certain amount of minutes. They want a certain amount of shots. And they're like, they want to guarantee that you're going to give them that. And Tommy, I don't think does that. And I think he looking for guys that are going to fit. And, both Henderson and Ramey, say what you want about them. They're both pretty easygoing, nice guys, basically. And Ramey, I think maybe Ramey felt a need to say it, but the fact that he did was pretty strong. He said, at Stanford, he said, I hit 8 threes, but I'd rather not hit 8 threes. I'd rather get the ball to our big guys. I mean, who's going to say that? If you're a grad transfer who's trying to get the NBA, you might be thinking to yourself deep down, well, I went 8 for 16. I don't really care what everyone else did because now I look better, but there's guys like Arizona has guys like that don't appear to be looking at it that way, or at least not, that's not their primary focus.
Bruce, let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to Arizona's home games coming up against Utah and Colorado. Obviously, the Wildcats did not do well against the Utes, so when they played them in Salt Lake, that was their Pac-12 opener. Seems like decades ago now. Yeah. And Colorado's been okay. KJ Simpson, former Arizona commit and Wildcat Country guest, entered the Wildcat Country curse, as we like to say, is doing real well for the Buffs. What are the big concerns for the Wildcats going into those games?
Well, I think they've done a good job of avenging losses that seems to get to this team. I think part of the problem with the Utah game is they went up there after they won the Maui. They're feeling great, good weather, blah, blah, blah. They went snorkeling or whatever on Thanksgiving Day, and they come back and they're feeling great about themselves. They're unbeaten, moving up in the polls. And then they go up to Utah and it's cold. They're playing at altitude. Couldn't hit shots. It was just didn't feel right for them. And then as we've learned since then, Utah is a lot better than people thought. They're not gonna wow you as far as the star power or 5-star talent, but they have some really good solid players, and they've got a stretch big in Carlson, who's really difficult to deal with. So there's kind of two sides to it, and they got to deal with that. I would think that at home on a Thursday night, they should be able to do that. They're certainly going to be motivated not only by that loss, but also coming after the Stanford loss. Utah, of course, will be motivated because they're kind of on the bubble. I mean, they've got a chance if Utah were able to pick up this game or a sweep in Arizona, that puts them in the field, as of the end of this weekend, if they can do that. So it's a big game for them as well. But I got to think Arizona's got an edge there. And then Colorado, as you said, Shane, is just they've been a little inconsistent, but still kind of I would think they're still kind of be scary for a team like Arizona. They handled them well up there last year. They don't have the two bigs they had last year. That was a huge loss, but they still do a lot of things well, and they've got a potential star there, and Tristan Da Silva, who's been, I think he was off the other day, but he's been really good for them a lot. And and they're sound defensively. They're well coached, and you just can't really dismiss them. And I think the other thing is, again, Arizona on Saturday, all three of their last losses have been on Saturdays, and that could be just a coincidence, but you got to wonder if sometimes maybe fatigue plays a little role in that, because they don't go very deep. But just so they'll have to be on edge. But they do get that game's in the evening as well, Saturday night. So I would think if Arizona, I think Arizona has a decent chance to win the next 4 games, and it comes down to UCLA, and whether or not UCLA has already won it, we don't know. But that's the way it should look, you think.
Last question for you, Bruce. According to all the expert bracketologists, Arizona went from maybe a borderline 1 seed to a 2 seed after losing at Stanford, and now as of this moment, the consensus seems to be UCLA is going to be the 2 in the West. Arizona is going to be a 2 seed somewhere else. I ultimately think it's going to come down to Arizona versus UCLA for that 2 seed in the West. If Arizona has to travel somewhere else other than Las Vegas for a potential Sweet 16 and Elite 8 round, how big a deal do you think that is in terms of just their opportunity to get to the Final Four?
Yeah, I think after Las Vegas, it's a toss-up. I mean, probably New York actually might be as good as any place because it's kind of more neutral, and and actually they have a lot of fans on the East Coast, and I'm sure there'll be a lot that will travel out to go to New York if they got in the East region. Vegas would be a big advantage for them, but if they don't get it, I think either those 2 other sites, or who knows who they're going to get matched up with, but it could very well be they'd be playing a team that was in their backyard, like they had to play Houston and San Antonio last year. So they want to avoid that if they can. I mean, coaches always say it doesn't matter where they're going, but it does matter, I think. And they're unbeaten in Las Vegas. They'd be comfortable. It's Pac-12, footprint, kind of, you don't go far away from home. All your fans can come up from here. And
we know how well Wildcat fans travel to Las Vegas.
It's a big deal. And I think traditionally didn't happen last year at Arizona. They got shipped because of Gonzaga. But usually the team that wins the Pac-12 is in the regular season is going to get to stay in the West. I think the committee does kind of look at that a little bit. And if there's a close call at all, they'll go with that. So in that sense, Arizona's behind because they're 2 games behind UCLA. Maybe they can beat them the last game of the season, but UCLA needs to drop another one. Maybe they will. They have to go at Utah and Colorado, and they might lose one of those. And and then it could come down to the last game of the season, and that'd be really something.
All right, Bruce, my final question for you. How many Pac-12 teams do you believe as of now will make the NCAA tournament? Now, Joe Lunardi, as of today, has 2 in there, with 3 kind of just on the outside. If you were to make a prediction now, how many get in?
I think, right now, I'd have to say 3 is probably the safest bet, but I think up to 5 could if things play out the right way. I think you got SC, Oregon, Utah, kind of on the
maybe ASU if they
ASU, maybe even ASU, exactly. If they and there's still 3 weeks left, and then the tournament, so basically 4 weeks, and there's still a lot that can happen. And like Oregon, even if Oregon lost another game, they always seem to play well in the Pac-12 tournament. If they got to Saturday in the Pac-12 tournament and didn't win it, they still might get an at-large bid. So it just depends how it plays out. And if they don't, I don't know everyone's schedules, but if there's not too many head-to-heads where they're beating each other up, if all those teams, win out or just lose one the rest of the way, then they could all get in. It's that close. There's a number of teams that are just outside the bubble right now, the way it looks.
Hey, I'm all for the more Pac-12 teams getting in, as long as, number 1, they don't beat Arizona, and number 2, their name isn't ASU. Bruce, great to chat with you as always, and great info. And I'm sure, knowing Shane and I, will probably have you on again soon before the tournament.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. Thanks.
If you're looking to add value to your sports cards, you've got to check out dtsportscards.com. They're an authorized dealer for PSA, which means you'll get great prices on your submissions if you go through them. And for just $2 a card, DT Sports Cards will take a close look at each card you submit and let you know whether it's worth grading. I just submitted some high-end hockey cards. They took a very close look, said they're good to go, and they all earned a PSA 10 grade, which tripled the value of each card. DT Sports Cards is located right here in Arizona. They provide quick, personalized service through email or direct messages. Find them online at dtsportscards.com and check them out on Instagram at dt_sportscards.
I want to thank Bruce Pasco for joining us. And this is our 3rd segment, which is presented by DT Sports Cards. Shane, I know there's a sports card show that you've alluded to that is coming up here in the next couple of weeks. What can you tell us about it?
Check out, so follow Chandler Gilbert Card Show on Instagram. They have all the information. We have a card show coming up a week from Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Chandler, 944 East Chandler Boulevard. I have to double check that address, but follow Chandler Gilbert Sports Cards on Instagram. They have all that information. I'll be a seller at the show, so you want to pick up some graded or non-graded sports cards. You can find me there. I've got some Juve stuff and some Cardinal stuff and I may have picked up a couple Kevin Durant cards in the last couple of weeks. So, I'll be there for that. And then you and I got an event coming up this Friday.
We do. We'll be at the Phoenix Airport Marriott. We're emceeing the Toast and Taste with Rocky LaRose, benefiting the East Valley chapter of the Arizona Alumni Association. So please, if you are at the event this Friday, come up and say hi and, let us know that you listen to the podcast, and it'll make Shane's and my night. So we hope to see all of you out there. Now, Shane, a couple things on the docket. First of all, baseball starts their weekend or their season this weekend against a really difficult opponent, and softball started last weekend. What can you tell us?
We got so Arizona's going around the Cactus League ballparks this weekend to start the season. The MLB Desert Invitational. They got Tennessee on Friday and at Salt River Fields in Scottsdale, where the Diamondbacks play. Fresno State at Sloan Park, where your Cubbies play. On Saturday. Michigan State and UC San Diego to round out the week. They go back and forth between Salt River Fields and Sloan Park. So
pretty cool.
Best of luck to Chip Hale and his guys as they start the season. Softball team got off to a great start. 5 games, 5 run rule wins. I have to say that slowly. Run rule wins. So they're off to a good start. They have the Tax Act Clearwater Invitational coming up in Florida, starting against Florida State on Thursday. So Caitlin Lowe's team is off to a great start and hopefully continue.
Ranked number 10 in the country, I believe. So, and I really think this team has a legitimate chance at making another run to Oklahoma City. So we will talk plenty about baseball and softball, especially after, basketball season with the men and women wind down. We'll get into them, both of those squads quite a bit, as both have a chance to make a run once again this year. We saw the men's team a couple of years ago make it to Omaha, women's team last year make it to Oklahoma City. It feels like we have to keep some Arizona sports going until June, right? It helps us out with the podcast. We've had some pretty good luck. We've had a bunch of coaching changes. We've had the Pac-12 TV deal and stuff like that. So we're going to see what this summer brings us. Is it Arizona to the Big 10 or Big 12? Is it the softball team to Oklahoma City, men's team to Omaha? I guess we'll find out. Let's start with basketball first and go from there. But a very difficult start to the season for the baseball team against Tennessee, who I believe is ranked quite highly and is a preseason national championship contender. So good luck to them. Another quick note, Shane. I saw today that Kevin Sumlin was hired as a co-offensive coordinator at Maryland. Any thoughts on that? I
thought it might take him a couple more years to count all his buyout money from his previous 2 head coaching failures, but good for him. He wants to get back on the horse and try his head out at coaching again. And I'll just say best of luck to him, and I will go ahead and leave it at that.
Why would Mike Loxley do this? Like, why? Kevin Sumlin had his run. Why? What are we doing here?
I don't care. As long as he's not back in Tucson, I don't care what he does.
Okay, now, Shane, the men and women's basketball teams are home this weekend against the Mountain Schools, and they play them in order. It goes Utah at Arizona on Thursday for men, and then Utah at Arizona on Friday for women, and then Colorado at Arizona and Colorado at Arizona. How many do the Wildcats win?
Oh, I'm in a good mood. It's Valentine's Day. I had a great Valentine's Day breakfast with the wife this morning.
Good.
So
good.
I am in a good mood. I'm going to say we go 4-0 this week, Eric.
Really?
Yeah. And we'll see. The women, I think they're better than what we saw against Stanford. They came very close to beating both Utah and Colorado, lost both those games, got hosed against Utah in particular. I think they remember that. I think they find a way to win both games. I think they'll at least get a split, but like we said, I think they need to win both to have a chance at a top 4 seed. But I think they'll look better this week. They match up well with both those teams. And on the men's side, I think they struggle against Utah. I think it's a close game. I think they maybe come out kind of flat, but I think they find a way to win. It's maybe one of those games where the home team or the home crowd at McHale kind of wills them past the finish line. And I think they take care of business and win by double digits. Excuse me. Easy for me to say. Double digits against Colorado.
Okay. I'm going to say that the women's team, will start with them. I think they lose to Utah and beat Colorado. So
Okay.
I think they split. I think the men's team takes care of Utah pretty good. Wins by double digits, not even concerned. And I think the game against Colorado for the men's team is a little tricky. So you and I are kind of the polar opposite here.
Why
so
do you say that?
3-1.
Why do you say that?
Well, Bruce Pasco said it. Arizona loses games on Saturdays. All three of their
how quickly we forget about that. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it happens on a Saturday. I think the Wildcats really haven't had that much trouble on Thursday games. It just depends. I expect them to bounce back well, and I think they're going to beat Colorado, but I think that game is going to be closer than we would like. How about that?
That's fair. As long as they win, I don't care. I can live with the stress, and especially on the basketball side, it's only 2 hours of stress as opposed to 4 hours, so it's a little easier to handle.
The football legitimately has taken years off of my life.
Well, yeah,
I believe it. I mean, it's that
every
ASU
Arizona
game,
Wildcat fan. Yeah, well, yeah, gosh.
I mean, that was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, still, we're going to talk about that for quite a while. A win's a win, but it just was like it should have been easier than that. You got 5 turn. All right,
they blew 2 double-digit leads. Yeah, it was like pulling teeth. It really was.
Pretty gross. Anyways, they got the win, and we'll move along. Let's hope that you were right, Shane. For once, I'm rooting against my 3-1. I hope they're 4-0. I hope you're right. But we look forward to seeing all of you, or at least some of you, out at the East Valley Toast and Taste event this weekend. Thanks to Bruce Pasco for joining us. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.